seats, eager to witness the drama that had drawn so much attention. The oak-paneled chamber smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, a mixture that carried the weight of countless broken marriages and bitter disputes. Today, however, was different. Today, everyone knew the scandal was bigger, messier, and far more personal. At the plaintiff's table, Michael Porter sat stone-faced, his broad shoulders squared, his jaw set in defiance. He didn't glance at the woman seated across the aisle from him. He refused to. Every fiber of his being recoiled at the thought of acknowledging her presence. To him, she was no longer his wife. She was a stranger. A traitor. That stranger was Brenda Miller Porter, dressed in a soft cream blouse that seemed carefully chosen to make her appear fragile and remorseful. Her blonde hair was pulled back neatly, but loose strands betrayed her nervous hands tugging at them before the hearing began. She kept glancing toward Michael, her eyes glistening with a desperate sheen, as if one tear, one look, might soften him. But he never looked back. The bailiff called out, "All rise." A hush fell over the courtroom as Judge Anderson entered, robes flowing, his face unreadable. He carried himself with the authority of a man who had seen it all: cheaters, liars, sobbing spouses, manipulative lawyers. Yet even he knew this case carried a peculiar sting. He had read the file. He had seen the DNA results. When everyone sat, Judge Anderson adjusted his glasses and glanced at both parties. His voice was firm, commanding. Today we address the dissolution of the marriage between Michael Porter and Brenda Miller Porter. I understand there are objections to proceeding directly with the divorce. Counsel, approach. Brenda's attorney, a sharp-featured woman in a navy suit, rose with practiced confidence. Your Honor, while my client acknowledges mistakes were made, she believes the marriage can still be salvaged. She deeply regrets her actions and has expressed a strong desire to reconcile with her husband. In light of this, we respectfully request that the court mandate marriage counseling before finalizing the divorce decree. The words hung in the air, heavy and absurd. Michael finally stirred. His eyes, cold as steel, flicked toward the attorney before settling on the judge. When he spoke, his voice was low, controlled, but brimming with fury. Mistakes? Is that what we're calling them now? Your Honor, my wife is pregnant, with another man's child. How exactly do you salvage a marriage after that? The gallery erupted in murmurs, reporters scribbling furiously, spectators exchanging wide-eyed looks. Brenda's face crumpled as she reached for a tissue, dabbing at tears that smeared her mascara. She turned toward Michael, whispering through trembling lips. Michael, please. I was lost. I didn't know what I was doing. We can fix this, I swear. Michael leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, his gaze fixed firmly on the judge. His jaw flexed, but he refused to look at her. To him, she no longer existed. Judge Anderson raised his gavel lightly, silencing the whispers. His voice carried the weight of law and inevitability. Mr. Porter, I understand your position. However, the law in this state allows the court to order counseling if there is even a possibility of reconciliation. Whether you believe it's futile or not, my responsibility is to ensure every avenue has been considered before I grant dissolution. Michael shot forward, his voice sharper now. With all due respect, Your Honor, reconciliation is not possible. She betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. She's carrying another man's baby under my roof. She lied, she humiliated me, and she expects me to sit in a room and pretend we're a couple worth saving? That's not justice. That's torture. Brenda sobbed openly now, clutching her attorney's arm, nodding frantically as if begging her to say something, anything, that could shift the tide. Her lawyer stepped closer to the bench, lowering her tone. Your Honor, my client understands the gravity of her actions. But we believe professional intervention could provide clarity. If the marriage is truly unsalvageable, counseling will prove it. If not, perhaps there is hope. The judge leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers, eyes narrowing on Michael. The room went silent again, the weight of the decision pressing down on everyone. Finally, he spoke. "Mr. Porter, like it or not, I am ordering you and Mrs. Porter to attend 6 weeks of mandatory marriage counseling. Failure to comply will delay the divorce proceedings indefinitely. This court will not finalize dissolution until counseling has been attempted." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Michael exhaled sharply through his nose, his body rigid with restrained anger. His hands clenched the edge of the table until his knuckles whitened. He turned his head, just enough to let Brenda see the hatred burning in his eyes. For a fleeting second, their gazes locked. Hers pleaded for mercy, his promised only war. The hearing adjourned, but the battle had only just begun. The footsteps and the faint hum of whispered gossip. Michael Porter stood near the exit, his broad frame rigid, his face locked in the same stone mask he had worn throughout the hearing. He refused to look at Brenda, who lingered behind with her attorney, still dabbing at her swollen eyes. Outside the chamber, reporters hovered like vultures, cameras flashing, microphones raised in desperate attempts to snatch a comment. Michael pushed through them without a word, his silence louder than any outburst could have been. He wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of a soundbite. Not today. By the time he reached the courthouse steps, Brenda was already following, her heels clicking rapidly on the stone floor. "Michael, please, wait," she cried, her voice breaking as she hurried after him. Michael stopped abruptly, his back still turned to her. For a moment, it seemed as though he might ignore her completely and keep walking, but something in her trembling tone made him pivot. He faced her, his expression carved from ice. "What do you want from me, Brenda?" His voice was calm, dangerously calm. "Haven't you taken enough already?" Brenda stepped forward, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Her mascara-streaked cheeks made her look almost pitiful, but her eyes gleamed with a desperate fire. "I made a mistake, Michael. I was stupid, reckless, but you and I, we have history, we have love. I can fix this, I know I can. If you'll just give me another chance." Michael barked out a bitter laugh, sharp and humorless. "Love? History? You threw all of that into a hotel room with some stranger. Don't stand there and talk about fixing things when you broke us beyond repair." Her lips quivered as tears welled again. She reached out, her hand trembling as it hovered near his arm. "I was lonely. I thought you didn't care anymore. You were always working, always away." Michael jerked his arm back before she could touch him, as though her skin were poison. His eyes narrowed, fury flashing through the veneer of calm. "Don't you dare put this on me. I was working to build us a future. I was out there killing myself so you could live comfortably. And while I was doing that, you decided to comfort yourself with someone else's bed." People passing by slowed down, sensing the storm between them, but Michael didn't care. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You disgust me, Brenda. The woman I married is gone. Whatever this is standing in front of me, it's not her. It's not my wife." Brenda's knees buckled as though his words were physical blows. She clutched her stomach instinctively, her free hand trembling in the air. "Please, please don't say that. Don't throw away everything we had. The baby." Michael cut her off, his eyes blazing. "The baby isn't mine. Don't you dare use it as a bargaining chip. You think dragging me into a counseling room will change the truth? It won't. You're carrying another man's child, and there is nothing left for us." His words rang out like a death sentence. Brenda collapsed against the courthouse railing, sobbing uncontrollably. Strangers averted their eyes, uncomfortable with the rawness of her breakdown. Michael, however, felt nothing. No pity, no remorse. Just emptiness where his love had once lived. He turned away, pulling his coat tighter against the chill in the air. Each step he took away from her felt like another chain breaking loose from around his neck. Brenda's voice chased after him, high-pitched, hysterical. Michael, please. I can change. Don't leave me like this. But he didn't look back. He couldn't. To him, she was already gone. As Michael disappeared into the crowd, Brenda slumped against the railing, her sobs echoing through the marble corridors of the courthouse. Her attorney placed a tentative hand on her shoulder, whispering hollow reassurances, but Brenda barely heard them. All she could see was the cold finality in Michael's eyes. For Michael, the decision had already been made. The judge could order counseling, the law could drag him into a room with her, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could resurrect the love she had buried with her betrayal. And deep down, Brenda knew it too. The man who had once adored her was gone, replaced by someone she no longer recognized. Someone she had created through her own betrayal. The war wasn't over, court orders and counseling sessions lay ahead, but the battle for Michael's heart had ended long before the gavel struck. For the storm that was about to break inside. Soft jazz played faintly from a speaker in the corner, the kind of background noise meant to soothe nerves, but for Michael Porter, it only grated against his skin. He sat stiffly on a leather couch, arms crossed, jaw clenched, every muscle in his body screaming resistance. Across from him, Brenda sat with her knees pressed tightly together, a box of tissues already clutched in her lap. Her eyes were swollen from hours of crying, and she looked smaller somehow, diminished by shame and regret. Between them sat Dr. Samuel Collins, a respected marriage counselor with graying temples and a calm demeanor, clipboard resting casually on his lap. "Thank you both for being here," Dr. Collins began, his voice measured and smooth. "I know this isn't easy, but it's a first step. Our goal today isn't to solve everything, but to open the door, to listen, to speak honestly, to see if reconciliation is possible." Michael let out a low, humorless laugh. "Reconciliation. That's a nice word, Doctor. Sounds clean. Simple. But nothing about this is clean. Nothing about this is simple." Brenda's head snapped toward him, eyes red and pleading. "Michael, please, don't do this. Don't come here just to mock me. I'm trying. I'm begging you, just listen. Listen." Michael's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. He finally turned his gaze on her, icy and unyielding. "I've listened enough, Brenda. I listened when you told me you loved me. I listened when you swore you were faithful. And while I was listening, you were in someone else's bed." Brenda flinched as though slapped. She grabbed a tissue and pressed it against her eyes, her shoulders trembling. "I was lost, Michael. I made a mistake. People make mistakes." Michael leaned forward, his glare burning into her. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something you don't mean in anger. What you did wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. A deliberate, disgusting choice." Dr. Collins raised a hand, stepping in before the exchange spiraled further. "Michael, I understand the depth of your pain. Betrayal cuts deep. But sometimes, couples can work through even the most difficult wounds if there's willingness on both sides. Brenda is here, showing that willingness. Can you find any space within yourself to at least try?" Michael's lips curved into a bitter smirk. "Try? Doctor, she's pregnant with another man's child. What exactly are we trying to save here? A marriage? Or a corpse?" The room fell silent. Brenda broke down completely, her sobs filling the space, raw and uncontrolled. She reached out toward Michael, her voice cracking. "Michael, I know you hate me. But I can't lose you. You're my husband. You're my life. Please, don't let this be the end." Michael recoiled from her touch, his voice laced with venom. "Don't call me your husband. You killed that word the night you opened your legs for him." Brenda gasped, her sobs choking into silence. Even Dr. Collins shifted uncomfortably, his professional mask momentarily cracking at the brutality of Michael's words. But Michael didn't care. He wanted the words to sting. He wanted her to feel even a fraction of the pain he carried every time he remembered the betrayal. Dr. Collins took a slow breath, then leaned forward, speaking gently. Michael, anger is natural. But if we only speak through anger, there can be no progress. What I ask of you, just for today, is to tell Brenda, not with venom, not with rage, but with honesty. What do you feel? Michael stared at the counselor for a long, tense moment. Then, slowly, he exhaled, his shoulders lowering just slightly. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, but it carried the weight of finality. What do I feel? Nothing. That's the problem. I used to love her so much it hurt. But now, it's gone. She's gone. Whatever was between us died the moment she betrayed me. And no amount of sessions, no amount of apologies, no amount of tears will bring it back. Brenda's sobs quieted into silence. Her hands shook as she clutched the tissue box to her chest, eyes wide with despair. The realization hit her harder than any insult could. She wasn't fighting for forgiveness anymore. She was fighting against emptiness. Against a man who no longer cared enough to even hate her properly. Dr. Collins nodded slowly, scribbling something onto his notepad. His calm eyes flickered between them, but even he couldn't disguise the truth settling over the room. For Brenda, it was the beginning of her desperate climb out of a pit she had dug herself. For Michael, it was confirmation of what he already knew. This was a farce, a legal formality forced on him by a system that didn't understand the depth of betrayal. The session ended in silence. Michael stood first, adjusting his jacket, his face unreadable. Brenda tried to reach for him again, but he walked past her without pause, the faintest scent of his cologne trailing behind. As the door clicked shut behind him, Brenda collapsed onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. Dr. Collins sat quietly, observing, knowing that this was only the first of many painful encounters to come. And deep inside, Michael felt nothing but the cold certainty of a man who knew love was dead. Slow-burning fuse. Brenda texted Michael every morning, every night, pleading for a chance to talk, to explain, to show she was committed to repairing what she had broken. Most of the time, Michael didn't even bother responding. When he did, his words were cold, clipped, stripped of any softness. One evening, Michael sat at his kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers spread out in front of him. The lamp above cast a dim yellow glow over the documents, making the black ink of his name feel like a permanent stain. He hadn't signed them yet. Not because he doubted what he wanted, but because every time he picked up the pen, a wave of conflicting emotions crashed over him. Anger. Loss. Betrayal. Grief. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. When he opened it, Brenda was standing there, her hair damp from the rain, eyes wide with desperation. Behind her, headlights from a parked SUV illuminated the street, and Michael immediately recognized it, her parents' car. "Michael, please," she begged softly. "Just hear me out. Mom and Dad are here. They want to talk to you." Michael's jaw tightened. "Of course they are. Let me guess, they came to tell me I should forgive you. That I should think of the baby, even though it's not mine." Her face crumpled. "It's not like that. They want to help. They don't want us to throw everything away." Before Michael could respond, George and Linda Matthews stepped out of the SUV, umbrellas shielding them from the rain. Brenda's parents had always been kind to him, welcoming him into their family as if he were their own son. But tonight, their faces carried the strain of parents caught between loyalty and truth. "Michael," George said gently, his voice carrying the authority of a man who rarely raised it. "Can we come in? Just for a few minutes?" Reluctantly, Michael stepped aside, leading them into the living room. The rain pattered against the windows as they settled into the seats. Linda leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Michael," she began softly, "we know what Brenda did was unforgivable. We're not here to defend it. But we've watched your marriage for years. We've seen the love you had for each other. We can't just sit by and let it all end without at least asking you to consider. Michael's laugh was bitter, hollow. Consider what, Linda? Raising another man's child? Sharing a bed with someone I can't even look at without feeling sick? Pretending that trust can just be patched up like a flat tire? Brenda sobbed quietly beside her mother, but Michael didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on George, who hadn't spoken yet. George cleared his throat, his tone firmer than his wife's. Michael, you're right. What Brenda did was wrong. But you're also a man of faith. A man of commitment. Marriage isn't about running when it gets hard. That struck a nerve. Michael leaned forward, his voice rising. Hard? You think this is just hard? George, your daughter didn't just break her vows, she burned them to the ground. You want to talk about commitment? Commitment is what I gave her every single day for years. And how did she repay me? By sleeping with another man and getting pregnant with his child. The room went silent. The weight of his words pressed down like a stone. Finally, Brenda broke, falling to her knees in front of him, clutching his hands in hers. Her tears streamed onto his skin, hot and desperate. Michael, please. Please don't leave me. Don't let this be the end. I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling every day. I'll take a paternity test if that's what you need. Just, don't walk away. Michael looked down at her, his expression unreadable. For a brief second, something flickered in his eyes, maybe pity, maybe a memory of the woman he once loved. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. He pulled his hands away, standing tall. You're right about one thing, Brenda, he said coldly. This is the end. And no amount of begging, crying, or parental intervention will change that. He turned to George and Linda, his voice steady but firm. I'm sorry. I respect you both, but your daughter made her choice. Now I'm making mine. Without another word, Michael walked to the door and opened it, signaling the conversation was over. Brenda's sobs echoed in the room as her parents slowly guided her outside, their faces heavy with defeat. When the door closed behind them, Michael stood alone in the silence. The house felt colder, emptier, but also, cleaner. For the first time since the affair, he felt a sense of clarity. The path ahead would be brutal, lawyers, court hearings, the unraveling of years of shared life. But it would also be his path, free of the lies that had poisoned his marriage. He picked up the pen from the table, his hand steady now. And this time, he signed his name on the divorce papers without hesitation. The kind of place where lives were dismantled piece by piece, and no one ever walked out whole. Michael adjusted his tie, his jaw set like stone as he followed his attorney, Karen Mitchell, into the family courtroom. She was sharp, confident, and known for her ruthless cross-examinations, a woman Michael trusted to fight for him in ways he couldn't stomach doing himself. Across the aisle, Brenda sat with her own lawyer, a younger man named Ethan Caldwell who looked more like a college professor than a divorce attorney. Brenda's eyes were downcast, her hands trembling as she clutched a file folder against her chest. Every so often, she glanced toward Michael, only to find him staring straight ahead, expression unreadable. The bailiff called the court to order, and the judge, Honorable Judge Reynolds, a no-nonsense man with a reputation for efficiency, took his seat. Papers shuffled, pens clicked, and the quiet tension in the room grew heavier by the second. Karen rose first, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Porter, seeks a swift and final dissolution of his marriage. The grounds are clear, infidelity resulting in a pregnancy outside the marriage. This is not speculation. This is fact. Brenda's lawyer immediately stood, voice smooth and deliberate. Your Honor, while we acknowledge the affair, we contest the characterization of this marriage as irreparably broken. My client is committed to reconciliation. Furthermore, we raise the issue of marital assets and potential spousal support. Mrs. Porter has been financially dependent on her husband, and any dissolution must consider her future well-being. Michael's fists clenched under the table. Spousal support. The audacity twisted in his gut like a knife. She had betrayed him, destroyed their marriage, and now she wanted money on top of it. He leaned toward Karen, whispering harshly, "Don't let them get away with this." Karen gave a slight nod, her eyes sharp. "Don't worry. I won't." The judge motioned for calm. "We'll hear both sides. Proceed." What followed was a brutal back and forth, every word dripping with accusation and defense. Karen painted a clear picture of betrayal, highlighting Michael's years of loyalty, his financial support, and the depth of the violation he had endured. Ethan countered with appeals to compassion, arguing that marriages could survive even the darkest storms, and that Brenda deserved a chance to repair what was broken. At one point, Brenda herself was called to speak. She stood shakily, tears brimming in her eyes. "Your Honor," she began, voice trembling, "I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt Michael in ways I can never undo. But I still love him. I'm carrying a child, and while it may not be his by blood, I wish more than anything it could still grow up in a home with two parents. I beg this court not to end our marriage." Michael's stomach churned at her words. He wanted to shout, to expose her plea for what it was, a desperate attempt to cling to the life she had shattered. But instead, he sat rigid, his silence louder than any outburst could have been. Then came his turn. Judge Reynolds asked him directly, "Mr. Porter, do you see any path forward for this marriage?" Michael rose slowly, his eyes locking with the judge's. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of finality. "No, Your Honor. Trust, once broken like this, cannot be repaired. Every day I stay in this marriage would be a reminder of the betrayal. I refuse to live in a lie, and I refuse to raise another man's child under the pretense of fatherhood. This marriage is over." The courtroom fell silent. Even Brenda's sobs seemed muted against the echo of his words. Judge Reynolds made a few notes before speaking. "This court recognizes the severity of the circumstances. We will proceed with due process regarding the division of assets and any claims for support, but as of today, it is clear this marriage cannot continue." Brenda collapsed into her chair, her lawyer whispering urgently in her ear, but her eyes never left Michael. They were wide, wet, and filled with disbelief, as though she had truly convinced herself that love alone could erase betrayal. Michael didn't look back at her. Not once. When the session adjourned, he walked out into the crisp autumn air, the courthouse steps stretching ahead of him like the beginning of a new path. Reporters weren't there, this wasn't the kind of case that made headlines, but in Michael's heart, it felt monumental. A chapter had closed. And yet, as he stood at the bottom of those steps, he felt no relief. Only emptiness. A hollow victory in a war he had never wanted to fight. But one thing was certain, he was free. But the echoes followed him long after. The autumn air felt colder than before, cutting straight through his suit. He loosened his tie, took a deep breath, and let his eyes roam across the street. Couples walked hand in hand, oblivious to the wreckage of love he had just left behind. Beside him, Karen Mitchell flipped through her notes, her voice practical and clipped. "We made good progress today. The judge seems to be leaning your way. Next session, we'll push harder on asset division. Brenda's team will try to play the sympathy card, but don't worry, I won't let her milk this for financial gain." Michael nodded, though his mind wasn't on money. It was on the look in Brenda's eyes as the judge declared their marriage unsalvageable. A mix of disbelief, heartbreak, and desperation. He hated her for what she did, but part of him pitied her too. The woman he had once sworn to protect was unraveling before his eyes. News traveled fast. By evening, his phone buzzed non-stop, texts from friends, co-workers, even distant relatives who had caught wind of the trial. "Heard about what happened, man. Stay strong. You don't deserve this. She's trash. Proud of you for standing up for yourself. Support poured in, but it didn't feel like victory. Every message reminded him of the scandal now attached to his name. Every sympathetic pat on the back felt like salt rubbed into an open wound. The fallout was even harsher for Brenda. Within days, whispers spread through their community. Neighbors who once waved at her now looked away. Friends who had celebrated her baby shower last year unfriended her online. At the grocery store, she overheard strangers murmuring, "That's the woman who cheated on her husband and got pregnant." She stopped going out unless she had to. Her parents brought groceries to her doorstep. The walls of her house became a prison, echoing with silence and regret. One evening, unable to stand it anymore, Brenda picked up her phone and called Michael. Against his better judgment, he answered. Her voice was hoarse, fragile. "Michael, it's me. I know you don't want to hear from me, but please, just listen." He said nothing, waiting. "I can't breathe without you," she whispered. "Everyone hates me. I've lost my friends, my reputation, my dignity. But losing you is worse than all of that combined. Please. I don't care what happens in court. I just need to know, is there even the smallest chance you'll forgive me someday?" Michael closed his eyes, leaning back against the wall. For a fleeting second, he remembered the woman who used to laugh at his corny jokes, the woman who danced barefoot with him in their kitchen, the woman who once looked at him like he was her entire world. But that woman was gone. "There's no going back, Brenda," he said quietly. "You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed the life we built. And no matter how much you beg, that life is gone." Her sobs came through the line, raw and desperate. Michael ended the call, his chest heavy. The next morning at work, he walked into the office and was met with awkward stares. A few co-workers offered condolences, while others avoided him entirely, as if divorce were contagious. His boss, a stern man named Richard Hale, called him into his office. "Michael, I know this is personal," Richard said carefully, "but when personal matters spill into public view, they can affect the company. I need you focused. Can you handle that?" Michael forced a nod. "Yes, sir. I can handle it." But deep down, he wasn't sure. Nights were sleepless, days were heavy, and though he had won a moral battle in court, the war inside him raged on. Meanwhile, Brenda tried a different tactic. Unable to reach Michael directly, she turned to social media. She posted pictures of old memories, their wedding day, their vacations, even candid shots of Michael smiling. Each caption dripped with regret, "We were perfect once. I'll never forgive myself for throwing it away." Some comments were sympathetic, but most were cruel. "Should have thought of that before you cheated. No one feels sorry for you. He deserves better." Brenda cried as she scrolled through the replies, yet she kept posting. It was the only way she felt connected to him, even if it meant exposing her pain to the world. Michael saw the posts eventually. A coworker showed him during lunch, shaking their head. "She's trying to win sympathy, man. Don't let it get to you." But it did get to him. Each picture was a reminder of what they once had. Each caption tugged at the faintest remnants of his heart. Still, he stood firm. Sympathy didn't erase betrayal. Nostalgia didn't erase truth. That night, Michael sat alone at his kitchen table, staring at the divorce decree draft. His signature was already there, black and final. But as he traced the ink with his eyes, he realized something chilling. Signing papers might end the marriage legally, but the ghost of betrayal would haunt him long after. And Brenda? She wasn't giving up, not yet. She lay awake in her darkened bedroom, staring at the ceiling, replaying every mistake, every lie, every stolen moment with the man who wasn't her husband. And every morning, she woke with a crushing weight on her chest, the knowledge that Michael was slipping further and further away. The public shame was unbearable. She couldn't walk into a cafe without feeling eyes burn into her back. At the pharmacy, she overheard whispers, "That's her, the one who cheated while married." Every judgment, every sneer chipped away at her sanity. But what cut deepest was Michael's silence. He ignored her texts, declined her calls, refused to meet her. He treated her like she no longer existed. And to Brenda, that was worse than his anger. One evening, unable to endure it any longer, she drove to Michael's house uninvited. Rain slicked the pavement, headlights reflecting off puddles as she pulled up to the curb. She could see his shadow moving inside, a faint silhouette against the warm glow of the living room lamp. She knocked once. No answer. Knocked again, harder. Finally, the door opened. Michael stood there, arms crossed, his expression cold. "What are you doing here, Brenda?" Her breath came out shaky. "I had to see you. Please, just 5 minutes. Go home." "No," she cried, her voice breaking. "I can't live like this. Everyone hates me, Michael. The world has turned its back on me. But if I still have you, if there's even a chance, I can survive this." Michael stepped outside, shutting the door firmly behind him. The rain dripped from his hair, his suit dampening under the storm. "Brenda, you need to stop. This, showing up here, begging, it won't change anything. You don't get to torch our life and then crawl back asking me to rebuild it with you." Her eyes overflowed, tears mixing with the rain. She reached out, clutching at his arm. "I'll do anything. Please. Let me prove I can be the wife you deserve. Let me raise this baby with you. It doesn't matter who the father is, we can make it ours." Michael ripped his arm free, fury flashing in his eyes. "Don't you dare say that. Don't you dare try to trap me with that child. You think I'll look at it every day and pretend it's mine? That I'll forget how it got here? No, Brenda. I won't live a lie for you." Her knees buckled, and she sank onto the wet pavement, sobbing. Neighbors' porch lights flicked on, curious eyes peeking through curtains. Michael cursed under his breath, knowing this scene would spread through the neighborhood by morning. "Get up," he muttered. "You're humiliating yourself." But Brenda didn't move. "If you leave me, I'll have nothing," she whispered. "I don't know if I can survive that." Michael's jaw clenched. For a moment, he almost bent down, almost helped her to her feet. Despite everything, part of him still remembered the woman he once loved. But he forced himself to harden again. "You should have thought about that before you betrayed me," he said flatly. Then he turned, walked inside, and locked the door. Brenda stayed there for nearly an hour, drenched and shivering, before her parents finally arrived to take her home. The next day, Brenda's desperation took another turn. She showed up at Michael's workplace, standing in the lobby with red eyes and a trembling smile. Co-workers whispered as she waited for him, clutching a paper bag with his favorite lunch from a nearby deli. When Michael walked in and saw her, his stomach dropped. "Brenda," he hissed under his breath, dragging her aside. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I brought you lunch," she said weakly, holding out the bag like a peace offering. "You've always loved the pastrami from Tony's. I thought, maybe." "Are you insane?" he snapped. "You can't just show up here. You're making a scene." Her voice cracked. "I don't care about a scene. I care about you. Please, Michael, just eat with me. 10 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Michael glanced around at the stairs, his boss watching from down the hall. His career, his reputation, his peace of mind, all of it was at risk every time Brenda pushed her way back into his life. "Leave," he said finally, his tone low and sharp. "If you ever show up here again, I'll get a restraining order." Brenda froze, her lips parting in shock. "You don't mean that." "I do." For a long moment, she just stood there, the paper bag trembling in her hands. Then, Slowly, she turned and walked out, her shoulders shaking. The smell of pastrami lingered in the lobby, a cruel reminder of a love that was now poisoned beyond repair. Michael exhaled, pressing his palms against his face. This wasn't just over, it was spiraling into something dangerous. Brenda wasn't letting go. And Michael was starting to fear what she might do next. The silence in his house was heavy, unnatural, filled with the absence of laughter, conversation, even arguments. He should have felt peace. Instead, every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the window put him on edge. Because Brenda wasn't gone. Not really. She lingered, like a storm cloud that refused to move on. One Thursday evening, he pulled into his driveway after a long day at work, headlights sweeping across the lawn. That's when he saw her car parked down the street. Dark. Engine off. But he knew it was her. She'd been watching his house for days now, showing up at odd hours, lurking just far enough away that he couldn't prove anything. He tried to ignore it at first. But the hair on the back of his neck rose each time he stepped outside, feeling her eyes on him. That night, as he locked the front door, his phone buzzed. A text from Brenda. "I saw you come home. Why didn't you wave at me?" His stomach twisted. He didn't reply. A second text came almost immediately. "I'm still your wife. You can't just pretend I don't exist." Michael's hands shook with frustration. He typed out a response, deleted it, then finally sent. "Stop following me. This is harassment." No reply came. But when he glanced out the window an hour later, her car was still there. 2 days later, things escalated. Michael returned from the gym Saturday morning to find Brenda sitting on his front porch, drenched in sweat despite the cool autumn air. Her hair was wild, her eyes glassy with exhaustion. "Brenda," he said sharply, dropping his gym bag on the ground. "What the hell are you doing here?" She stood slowly, clutching a small photo album in her hands. "I couldn't sleep," she murmured. "I kept thinking about us. About everything we've been through. I brought this. I thought maybe if you looked at it, you'd remember how much we loved each other." Michael felt a surge of anger. Memories don't erase betrayal. Her eyes darted wildly, her voice rising. "But they matter. They matter, Michael. You can't just throw away years of love because of one mistake." "One mistake?" His voice thundered. "You call an affair and another man's child a mistake? That's not a mistake, Brenda, that's a choice you made over and over again." She flinched, gripping the photo album tighter. "If you won't forgive me, then what am I supposed to do? I don't want to live without you." Her words chilled him. The desperation in her tone wasn't just emotional anymore, it was dangerous. "Go home," he said firmly, unlocking his door. "Don't come back here again. I mean it." But as he stepped inside, Brenda shouted after him, her voice breaking, echoing through the quiet neighborhood. "If you leave me, Michael, I'll make sure you regret it." The threat hung in the air like poison. Michael froze, his hand tightening on the doorknob. For the first time, he realized she wasn't just broken, she was unstable. Later that evening, his lawyer Karen called after receiving an urgent email from Brenda's attorney. "Michael, listen carefully," Karen said. "She's pushing hard now. Her lawyer claims you've been emotionally cruel, that you're abandoning her during pregnancy. She's threatening to fight for spousal support aggressively." Michael's laugh was bitter. "She destroys our marriage and then plays the victim. Unbelievable." Karen's tone was cautious. "It's not just legal anymore, Michael. She's unraveling. If she keeps showing up at your house, if she keeps making threats, you need to protect yourself. File a restraining order if necessary." Michael rubbed his temples. The weight of it all pressed down on him, the betrayal, the court battles, the constant fear of what Brenda might do next. He wasn't sure how much longer he could take it. That night, as he sat alone at his kitchen table, he heard a faint scratching at the back door. Heart pounding, he grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the sound. When he flung the door open, the beam of light cut across the yard. There, just beyond the porch, stood Brenda. Her eyes were wild, her cheeks streaked with tears. "Michael," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Please, just talk to me." He tightened his grip on the flashlight, rage and fear warring inside him. "Get off my property, Brenda. Now. Or I'll call the police." She took a hesitant step forward, clutching the photo album to her chest like a lifeline. "You don't mean that. You still love me. I know you do. If you didn't, you wouldn't look at me like that." Michael's voice was steel. "I don't love you anymore. And if you come back here again, I'll make sure the law keeps you away from me." The words shattered her. She stumbled back, the photo album slipping from her hands and landing in the dirt. For a long moment, she stared at him, her chest heaving. Then, slowly, she turned and disappeared into the night. Michael exhaled, his pulse hammering. He bent to pick up the album but stopped himself. Instead, he left it there, lying open in the mud, rain beginning to soak the pictures of a life that no longer existed. For Michael, the breaking point had come. And for Brenda, it was only the beginning. People, for celebrities stalked by obsessed fans or for strangers caught in toxic disputes. Never in his wildest imagination did he think he'd be the one sitting across from his lawyer, discussing legal paperwork to keep his own wife away from him. But here he was. Karen tapped the stack of documents on her desk, her tone businesslike. "Michael, the incidents you've described are more than enough to file. She's shown up uninvited at your home, harassed you with texts, made verbal threats. That's not just desperation. That's intimidation." Michael leaned back in the chair, rubbing his jaw. He hadn't slept properly in days. "I don't want to destroy her, Karen. She's already unraveling. But she won't stop. I can't live like this." Karen's gaze softened slightly. "This isn't about punishing her. It's about protecting yourself. A restraining order could create the boundary she clearly refuses to respect." He nodded slowly. It felt surreal. The woman he once trusted with his dreams, his heart, his future child, now he had to keep her at a legal distance. By the following week, the paperwork was filed. The court date was set. That night, Michael came home to find his front yard eerily quiet. No car lurking in the shadows. No figure pacing the porch. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to exhale. But peace, he would soon learn, was only temporary. At 2 a.m., his phone buzzed. A voicemail. He played it half asleep, but the sound of Brenda's voice jolted him awake instantly. "Michael," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You don't understand what you're doing to me. If you go through with this order, you'll kill me. I mean it. I can't survive without you. Please. I'll do anything. Don't make me your enemy." Michael sat on the edge of his bed, phone pressed to his ear, every muscle in his body tensed. The message wasn't just pleading, it was threatening, veiled in desperation. He forwarded the voicemail to Karen first thing in the morning. Her reply was blunt, "This strengthens your case. Don't delete anything." 2 days later, the situation escalated again. Michael was returning from a client meeting downtown when he spotted Brenda in the courthouse parking lot. She wasn't supposed to know his schedule. Yet there she was, standing by her car, eyes red, hair tangled, as if she hadn't slept in days. When she saw him, she broke into a run. "Michael, wait," she cried, clutching his sleeve. "Don't do this. You're making a mistake." He yanked his arm free, scanning the lot nervously, aware of the stares from strangers. "You can't keep ambushing me like this, Brenda. It's over. She clutched her stomach dramatically. What about the baby? You're willing to let your own child grow up without a father? His jaw tightened. That's not my child. Stop using it as leverage. Her face contorted with fury, the mask of vulnerability cracking to reveal something darker. If you won't be a father, then maybe no one will. You think you can erase me, Michael? You'll regret this. Security guards rushed over, pulling her back as Michael hurried toward the courthouse doors, his heart hammering. He had no idea what she was capable of anymore. That night, he couldn't shake her words. Maybe no one will. Was it just rage? Or a glimpse of something far more dangerous? He found himself double-checking locks, glancing out windows, keeping a baseball bat propped near the bed. The restraining order couldn't come fast enough. At the hearing, Brenda looked disheveled, her hands trembling as she clutched tissues. Her attorney painted her as a grieving, abandoned wife suffering a mental breakdown brought on by pregnancy stress. But then Karen played the voicemail. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence as Brenda's own voice echoed, "Don't make me your enemy. I'll do anything." The judge's expression hardened. "Mrs. Carter, your behavior is deeply concerning. I am granting Mr. Carter's request for a temporary restraining order, effective immediately." Brenda broke down in sobs, reaching toward Michael across the courtroom. "Please. Don't do this to us." Michael didn't move. He didn't speak. For once, the law was on his side. But even as he left the courthouse with Karen, a gnawing dread lingered in his gut. Restraining orders were words on paper, nothing more. They couldn't stop someone determined enough to cross the line. "Michael," Karen warned as they walked down the marble steps, "prepare yourself. She may not respect the order. Sometimes, these things escalate before they get better." He nodded grimly. In his heart, he already knew, the storm wasn't over. It was just beginning to spin faster, darker, more dangerous. And Brenda? She wasn't finished with him yet. But it didn't stop the whispers. In a town like theirs, gossip spread like wildfire, and Brenda's erratic behavior only fueled it further. Neighbors had seen her crying in the street, shouting outside his house, following him around town. It was only a matter of time before her unraveling spilled into the public eye. The breaking point came during a court session about spousal support. Brenda walked in wearing a pale blue maternity dress, trying to look fragile and dignified. Her lawyer framed her as the wounded victim, abandoned by her cruel husband in her most vulnerable state. They painted a picture of a broken woman, desperately clinging to the man she loved. Michael sat rigid, jaw clenched, forcing himself to remain silent. He didn't want to give her performance any more power than it already had. But then Karen, calm and calculating, stood. "Your Honor, the foundation of Mrs. Carter's claim is that Mr. Carter is the father of her unborn child. That is not the case. We have evidence suggesting otherwise. In fact, we have reason to believe there are multiple possible fathers." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Brenda's head snapped toward Karen, eyes blazing. "That's a lie," she screamed. Karen remained composed. "Then I'm sure you'll have no objection to a court-ordered paternity test." The judge's gavel banged, calling for order as the courtroom buzzed with shock. Brenda's cheeks burned crimson, her composure cracking under the pressure. Days later, the scandal hit the news. Local tabloids and gossip blogs plastered Brenda's photo everywhere, pregnant divorcee's baby drama, who's the father? Worse, as the court compelled her to submit medical records, the truth began spilling out. There wasn't just one potential father. There were 7. 7 men. The revelation detonated like a bomb. Social media lit up with memes, jokes, cruel commentary. Her name became a hashtag overnight. Hashtag baby daddy drama. Hashtag scandalous7. Hashtag not the father. Michael didn't enjoy seeing it. He wasn't vindictive by nature. But he couldn't deny the relief that washed over him when the spotlight finally shifted away from him and squarely onto Brenda. The next hearing was a circus. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, shouting questions as Brenda stumbled through the crowd, face hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Inside, the tension was unbearable. Brenda's attorney looked like he wanted to vanish into the floor. Meanwhile, Karen sat poised, letting the scandal speak for itself. The judge was furious. "Mrs. Carter, this court will not tolerate deceit. You attempted to leverage pregnancy to secure financial support from your husband, yet the evidence shows he is not, in fact, the father. This undermines your entire case." Brenda's lip quivered. But he's my husband. He should still take care of me." The judge cut her off. "Enough. Your actions border on fraud. As of this moment, your petition for spousal support is denied." Michael closed his eyes for a brief moment, the words washing over him like a tide of justice. For the first time in months, he felt the scales tilt in his favor. The fallout was brutal for Brenda. Friends stopped answering her calls. Family members avoided her. Even the men rumored to be potential fathers ghosted her, terrified of being dragged further into the scandal. Her once polished reputation shattered overnight. Where she once held her head high at social gatherings, she now ducked into alleys to avoid paparazzi. Where she once demanded respect in the courtroom, she now whimpered like a child. And Michael? For the first time, he could breathe. The court was on his side. The public was on his side. Even Brenda's mask had finally crumbled. But deep down, he knew the danger hadn't passed. Humiliation could break some people, but in others, it sparked something darker. Brenda wasn't the type to retreat quietly into shame. She was cornered. Exposed. And desperate people did desperate things. That night, Michael sat on his porch, a cool breeze rustling through the trees. His phone buzzed with messages of support, colleagues, neighbors, even old friends reaching out to congratulate him on standing strong. But one message stood out, appearing from an unknown number. It read, "You think you've won. But this isn't over, Michael. You ruined my life. Now I'm going to ruin yours." His blood ran cold. The scandal may have stripped Brenda of her public image, but it also left her with nothing to lose. And a person with nothing to lose was the most dangerous kind of enemy. But it didn't stop the whispers. In a town like theirs, gossip spread like wildfire, and Brenda's erratic behavior only fueled it further. Neighbors had seen her crying in the street, shouting outside his house, following him around town. It was only a matter of time before her unraveling spilled into the public eye. The breaking point came during a court session about spousal support. Brenda walked in wearing a pale blue maternity dress, trying to look fragile and dignified. Her lawyer framed her as the wounded victim, abandoned by her cruel husband in her most vulnerable state. They painted a picture of a broken woman, desperately clinging to the man she loved. Michael sat rigid, jaw clenched, forcing himself to remain silent. He didn't want to give her performance any more power than it already had. But then Karen, calm and calculating, stood. "Your Honor, the foundation of Mrs. Carter's claim is that Mr. Carter is the father of her unborn child. That is not the case. We have evidence suggesting otherwise. In fact, we have reason to believe there are multiple possible fathers." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Brenda's head snapped toward Karen, eyes blazing. "That's a lie," she screamed. Karen remained composed. "Then I'm sure you'll have no objection to a court-ordered paternity test." The judge's gavel banged, calling for order as the courtroom buzzed with shock. Brenda's cheeks burned crimson, her composure cracking under the pressure. Days later, the scandal hit the news. Local tabloids and gossip blogs plastered Brenda's photo everywhere, pregnant divorcee's baby drama, who's the father? Worse, as the court compelled her to submit medical records, the truth began spilling out. There wasn't just one potential father. There were 7. 7 men. The revelation detonated like a bomb. Social media lit up with memes, jokes, cruel commentary. Her name became a hashtag overnight. Hashtag baby daddy drama. Hashtag scandalous7. Hashtag not the father. Michael didn't enjoy seeing it. He wasn't vindictive by nature. But he couldn't deny the relief that washed over him when the spotlight finally shifted away from him and squarely onto Brenda. The next hearing was a circus. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, shouting questions as Brenda stumbled through the crowd, face hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Inside, the tension was unbearable. Brenda's attorney looked like he wanted to vanish into the floor. Meanwhile, Karen sat poised, letting the scandal speak for itself. The judge was furious. "Mrs. Carter, this court will not tolerate deceit. You attempted to leverage pregnancy to secure financial support from your husband, yet the evidence shows he is not, in fact, the father. This undermines your entire case." Brenda's lip quivered. But he's my husband. He should still take care of me." The judge cut her off. "Enough. Your actions border on fraud. As of this moment, your petition for spousal support is denied." Michael closed his eyes for a brief moment, the words washing over him like a tide of justice. For the first time in months, he felt the scales tilt in his favor. The fallout was brutal for Brenda. Friends stopped answering her calls. Family members avoided her. Even the men rumored to be potential fathers ghosted her, terrified of being dragged further into the scandal. Her once polished reputation shattered overnight. Where she once held her head high at social gatherings, she now ducked into alleys to avoid paparazzi. Where she once demanded respect in the courtroom, she now whimpered like a child. And Michael? For the first time, he could breathe. The court was on his side. The public was on his side. Even Brenda's mask had finally crumbled. But deep down, he knew the danger hadn't passed. Humiliation could break some people, but in others, it sparked something darker. Brenda wasn't the type to retreat quietly into shame. She was cornered. Exposed. And desperate people did desperate things. That night, Michael sat on his porch, a cool breeze rustling through the trees. His phone buzzed with messages of support, colleagues, neighbors, even old friends reaching out to congratulate him on standing strong. But one message stood out, appearing from an unknown number. It read, "You think you've won. But this isn't over, Michael. You ruined my life. Now I'm going to ruin yours." His blood ran cold. The scandal may have stripped Brenda of her public image, but it also left her with nothing to lose. And a person with nothing to lose was the most dangerous kind of enemy. Shades of gold and crimson. For Michael, the crisp air carried a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in years. The storm was finally behind him. Brenda was gone. After her arrest, the courts moved quickly. She was charged with violating the restraining order, harassment, and trespassing. Though she pled for leniency, the judge was firm. She was ordered into mandatory counseling and placed under probation. Word around town was that she was also facing lawsuits from some of the men tangled in her paternity scandal. It was a steep fall from the woman who once carried herself like she had the world at her feet. Michael didn't rejoice in her downfall. He felt relieved. Sad, in some ways, but relieved. There was no more knocking on his door in the middle of the night, no more threats, no more chaos hanging over his head like a storm cloud ready to break. For the first time in a long time, he could breathe freely. Life didn't snap back to normal overnight. Healing never worked that way. But slowly, piece by piece, Michael began to rebuild. He took long walks in the park again, rediscovering the calm that nature offered. He started accepting more social invitations, reconnecting with friends who had quietly supported him from the sidelines. And then, there was Nancy. She had been there during the darkest hours, steady, patient, never pushing him before he was ready. Over dinners and quiet evenings, their friendship deepened into something more. One evening, they sat on his porch, wrapped in blankets against the chill. Nancy leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice soft. "You've been through hell, Michael. But look at you now. You made it through." He exhaled, watching leaves swirl across the yard. "I thought I'd lost myself in all of it. The lies, the betrayal, the court battles, it felt like my whole identity was wrapped up in the pain she caused. But now, I feel like I finally know who I am again." Nancy smiled. Stronger than before. Michael squeezed her hand. "Wiser, too. I know now that love isn't about clinging to something broken. It's about building something real." The divorce was finalized quietly. No more delays, no more fights. The court sided fully with Michael, no alimony, no obligations, no ties. Brenda's child was officially declared unrelated to him. His name was cleared. When the papers arrived in the mail, Michael sat at the kitchen table staring at the signature line. Signing them felt like more than an end, it felt like a rebirth. With one stroke of his pen, he closed the chapter on Brenda forever. Months later, Michael hosted a small dinner at his house. Just a handful of close friends and Nancy. Laughter filled the rooms that had once been heavy with silence and dread. At one point, he excused himself and stepped into the living room, glancing at the mantel above the fireplace. Where once sat framed wedding photos, now rested snapshots of new memories, hikes with friends, barbecues in the backyard, Nancy smiling in the sunlight. He didn't erase his past completely. Tucked away in a box in the attic were the remnants of his marriage, old photos, wedding invitations, tokens from a life that once felt unshakable. But those belonged to another time, another man. The Michael standing here tonight was not that man anymore. Nancy joined him, slipping her hand into his. "You okay?" she asked, studying his expression. He nodded, a genuine smile tugging at his lips. "More than okay." Together, they returned to the table, the sound of laughter growing louder, warmer. As the evening wound down, Michael stepped outside to the porch once more. The night was calm, the stars scattered across the sky. He thought about the storm he had survived, the betrayal, the courtroom battles, the humiliation, the threats. All of it had nearly broken him. But storms didn't last forever. And when they passed, they left behind a sky more beautiful than before. For Michael Carter, the storm had passed. And ahead lay nothing but a clear horizon. A new beginning.